Far beneath the frozen mountains of Skyrim, beyond the ancient Nordic tombs and forgotten Dwemer ruins, there are deeper places still, hidden beneath layers of stone and ice. Enormous caverns stretch endlessly through the darkness. Underground rivers flow silently beneath black cliffs. Pale blue fungi glow softly in the distance, like ghostly stars. Ancient towers rise from underground lakes, and in the silence of those forgotten depths, something still moves. Travelers who wander too deeply into the ruins beneath Skyrim sometimes speak of strange sounds echoing through the darkness. The scraping of claws against stone, distant clicking noises carried through cavern tunnels, the flickering movement of pale creatures watching from broken archways. And somewhere, far below the surface world, the descendants of an ancient civilization still survive, the Falmer. To most people in Skyrim, the Falmer are little more than monsters, blind creatures lurking beneath ruined cities, predators hiding in caves and tunnels, twisted beings that attack travelers without warning before vanishing back into the darkness beneath the earth. But long before they became the creatures feared across Skyrim, the Falmer were something else entirely. They were kings. They were priests. They were scholars, builders, mages, and rulers of a vast civilization that existed long before the first Nordic kingdoms rose across the frozen north. Before Skyrim belonged to men, it belonged to the Snow Elves. Their cities once gleamed beneath the northern lights. Their temples rose beside frozen rivers and ancient mountains. They worshipped the sun and the heavens above them. They lived among the untouched wilderness of ancient Skyrim during an age when the world itself still felt young. And then, everything changed. War came to Skyrim. The arrival of mankind shattered the balance that had existed across the north for generations. Fear turned into hatred. Hatred became violence. And violence became one of the bloodiest conflicts in the history of Tamriel. The destruction of the Snow Elves did not happen all at once. It happened slowly, kingdom by kingdom, temple by temple, until an entire civilization stood on the edge of extinction, desperate to survive. The remaining Snow Elves turned toward the only people who offered them refuge: the Dwemer, the Deep Elves, the ancient builders who lived beneath the mountains of Skyrim in vast underground cities of brass and stone. And it was there, in the endless darkness beneath the earth, that the final tragedy of the Snow Elves truly began. Because the Dwemer did not save them. They transformed them over countless generations. Blindness consumed them. Their bodies changed. Their minds adapted to the darkness surrounding them. The elegant Snow Elves slowly disappeared, replaced by something new, something broken, something savage, something that still remembers, deep within its blood, what it once was. Tonight, we explore the complete history and tragedy of the Falmer in the Elder Scrolls. From the ancient beauty of Snow Elf civilization to the Night of Tears, the genocide carried out during the Return of Ysgramor, the betrayal of the Dwemer, the glowing caverns of Blackreach, and the horrifying transformation that created the Falmer known across Skyrim today. This is not simply the story of monsters beneath the earth. It is the story of an entire people erased from history, a civilization swallowed by darkness, a tragedy buried beneath the mountains of Skyrim itself. So dim the light, settle beside the fire, and descend with me into the silent cities beneath Skyrim Chapter 1. The Snow Elves Before the Fall. Long before the Empire, before the Dragonborn, before the rise of Nordic kingdoms across Skyrim, the northern lands of Tamriel belonged to another people entirely, the Snow Elves. Known in ancient texts as the Falmer, these elves once ruled much of Skyrim during a forgotten age lost to history and myth. Modern depictions of the Falmer often focus only on the twisted creatures that haunt Dwemer ruins beneath the earth. But the original Snow Elves were said to be remarkably beautiful. Ancient accounts describe them as graceful and radiant, with pale skin that reflected the icy landscapes of Skyrim itself. Their civilization flourished during a time when the North was still wild and untouched. Skyrim during this era looked very different from the province known in later ages. Massive forests stretched across the mountains. Ancient glaciers dominated the northern coastlines. Snowstorms swept through valleys untouched by roads or settlements. Great animals roamed freely through the wilderness. Entire regions remained unexplored by outsiders. And within that frozen world, the Snow Elves built their kingdoms. Unlike the Dwemer, whose cities disappeared beneath the earth, the Snow Elves seemed deeply connected to the natural beauty of Skyrim itself. Their architecture reflected this relationship. Ancient Snow Elf structures were elegant and luminous. White stone temples rose from snowy cliffsides. Towers gleamed beneath moonlight. Archways curved like frozen branches covered in ice. Their cities appeared almost delicate compared to the harsh stone fortresses later built by the Nords. Even thousands of years later, the Forgotten Vale still preserves fragments of that lost civilization. When travelers first enter the Forgotten Vale during the events of Skyrim's Dawnguard expansion, they encounter something almost dreamlike. Frozen waterfalls cascading through massive cliffs, ancient shrines hidden beneath snow and ice, quiet temples standing untouched for centuries, soft light reflecting across frozen lakes beneath enormous mountains. The Forgotten Vale does not feel like a ruined kingdom. It feels like a memory, a final surviving fragment of a civilization that once covered much of Skyrim itself. And within those surviving ruins, we begin to understand something important about the Snow Elves. They were not simply warriors or rulers. They were deeply spiritual people. Religion shaped much of Snow Elf culture. Above all else, the Snow Elves worshipped Auri-El, the elven aspect of Akatosh, the god associated with time, eternity, and divine order. To the Snow Elves, Auri-El represented purity, transcendence, and the connection between the mortal world and the heavens above. This devotion influenced nearly every aspect of their civilization. Their temples aligned with sunlight and celestial movements. Their priests guarded sacred relics connected to Auri-El. Their architecture emphasized height, openness, and light rather than defensive strength. Unlike the later Falmer buried beneath the darkness, the Snow Elves worshipped the sky itself. Sunlight held deep symbolic meaning within their culture. Even Gelebor, one of the final surviving Snow Elves encountered in Skyrim, continues to protect sacred way shrines devoted to Auri-El thousands of years after the collapse of his people. And Gelebor's existence reveals another painful truth. The Snow Elves were never meant to disappear. Their extinction was not natural. It was violent. And long before that violence arrived, Skyrim belonged entirely to them. The earliest human settlers in Skyrim were outsiders. The Snow Elves had already lived across the northern lands for generations before mankind began arriving from Atmora, far across the Sea of Ghosts. At first, these early human settlements were small, fragile, isolated. The frozen climate of Skyrim was brutal, even for the Nords who later mastered it. Early human communities struggled against snowstorms, starvation, predators and isolation. For a time, an uneasy coexistence may have existed between the Snow Elves and the growing human presence. But coexistence in Skyrim rarely remains peaceful forever, especially in a land defined by survival. And slowly, tensions began to grow between the ancient rulers of Skyrim and the newcomers arriving from across the sea. No one truly knows exactly what caused the conflict between the Snow Elves and mankind to finally erupt into war, but eventually, everything would change during a single horrifying night remembered forever in Nordic history. The Night of Tears, Chapter 2. Skyrim before men. Before the rise of Nordic kingdoms, before Whiterun, Windhelm, Solitude, and the Empire itself, Skyrim was a far quieter place. Not peaceful, but untouched. The Skyrim known during the age of the Snow Elves was a world dominated almost entirely by nature. Massive pine forests stretched endlessly across frozen valleys. Snowstorms buried entire mountain passes beneath ice. Ancient rivers carved through cliffs untouched by roads or bridges. The northern coastlines remained wild and dangerous beneath the grey waters of the Sea of Ghosts. At night, the sky above Skyrim must have appeared almost unreal. The auroras dancing overhead. The twin moons Massa and Secunda hanging above frozen peaks. The silence of snow-covered wilderness stretching for miles without another living soul in sight. It was within this ancient and isolated world that the Snow Elves built their civilization. Unlike later human kingdoms, which often emphasized war and expansion, the Snow Elves seemed deeply tied to Skyrim's landscape itself. Many of their surviving ruins appear almost hidden within nature, rather than dominating it. Their temples rose quietly beside frozen lakes. Sacred shrines stood within mountain valleys. Bridges curved gracefully above waterfalls and cliffs. Even now, thousands of years later, the surviving architecture of the Snow Elves feels strangely peaceful compared to the brutal stone structures later built by the Nords. There is elegance within their ruins, stillness, silence. The Snow Elves did not build cities that attempted to conquer the wilderness surrounding them. Instead, they seemed to live alongside it. And because of this, ancient Skyrim during the reign of the Snow Elves likely felt almost mythical. Imagine standing atop a mountain during that forgotten age. No roads, no war horns, no burning cities, only forests, snow, distant temples, and the cold wind moving across the northern wilderness. The Falmer ruled this land long before mankind arrived from Atmora, and for generations, they may have believed Skyrim would always belong to them. But across the sea, another people struggled to survive. The Atmorans, far to the north beyond Tamriel. The frozen continent of Atmora slowly began collapsing beneath worsening climate and endless hardship. Ancient human civilizations there suffered through brutal winters, famine, and violence. Eventually, many Atmorans looked south toward Tamriel, towards Skyrim, and among those early settlers, one name would become legendary throughout Nordic history: Ysgramor. According to Nordic legend, Ysgramor and his people arrived in Skyrim seeking survival and opportunity. They established one of the earliest human settlements in the province, Sarthal. At first, Sarthal was likely small, a rough settlement surrounded by wilderness and uncertainty. The Snow Elves watched these newcomers carefully, and for a time, peace may have existed between them. But the relationship between the Falmer and mankind remains one of the great mysteries of Elder Scrolls history, because eventually, something happened. Something terrible enough to ignite centuries of hatred between the two civilizations. Modern Nordic accounts portray the Snow Elves as aggressors, driven by jealousy and fear of humanity's growing presence. But the truth may have been far more complicated. Some theories suggest the Snow Elves feared the rapid expansion of human settlements across Skyrim. Others believe the discovery of powerful artifacts beneath Sarthal may have contributed to rising tensions. The Eye of Magnus itself, one of the most dangerous magical relics in Tamrielic history, was later discovered beneath the city. And some scholars believe the Snow Elves may have known about its existence long before the Nords ever arrived. Perhaps they feared what mankind might unleash, or perhaps fear simply became hatred over time. Whatever the reason, the fragile peace between the Snow Elves and the Atmarans would not survive. And eventually, Skyrim would witness one of the bloodiest nights in its history. Chapter 3. The Night of Tears. The snow fell quietly over Sarthal. At least, that is how many later legends describe it. A cold night beneath the northern sky, the settlement fell silent beneath the darkness. Families sleeping beside fires, children resting safely behind wooden walls. The first human city in Skyrim, standing against the frozen wilderness surrounding it. And somewhere beyond those walls, the Snow Elves were already moving through the snow. The Night of Tears remains one of the most important and mysterious events in all Elder Scrolls history. According to Nordic legend, the Snow Elves launched a sudden and devastating attack against Sarthal during the night. The city burned. Its people were slaughtered. Men, women, and children died as the settlement collapsed into chaos beneath the flames. Only a handful of survivors escaped. Among them, Ysgramor and his sons. The event became one of the foundational traumas of Nordic civilization itself. Even centuries later, the Night of Tears continued shaping how Nords viewed elves across Tamriel. To the Nords, it represented betrayal. Proof that peaceful coexistence with elves was impossible. But history within the Elder Scrolls is rarely simple, and the Night of Tears remains surrounded by uncertainty. Modern historians still debate what truly happened that night. Were the Snow Elves attempting genocide? Did they fear the growing human presence within Skyrim? Were they searching for the Eye of Magnus hidden beneath Sarthal? Or had tensions between the two civilizations already escalated into violence long before the attack itself? The truth has likely been buried beneath centuries of propaganda, myth, and revenge. But regardless of the motives behind the assault, the consequences would reshape Skyrim forever, because Ysgramor survived, and he did not forgive. After escaping Sarthal, Ysgramor fled back to Atmora. There, he gathered warriors, hundreds of them, the 500 companions. Ancient Nordic legends transformed these warriors into near mythological figures over time. Massive warriors crossing the sea of ghosts beneath storm-filled skies. Men driven not only by vengeance, but by the belief that Skyrim itself now belonged to mankind. When they returned, they brought war with them. Not a single battle, not a single campaign, but generations of brutal extermination. The return of Ysgramor marked the beginning of the end for the Snow Elves. Nordic armies pushed across Skyrim relentlessly. Snow Elf settlements fell one after another. Entire cities disappeared beneath fire and bloodshed. The conflict between the Nords and the Falmer became savage beyond description. And over time, revenge transformed into annihilation. The Snow Elves slowly lost control of Skyrim itself, driven farther and farther into isolated regions. Their civilization began collapsing beneath the endless pressure of Nordic expansion. Many likely believed the conflict would eventually end, that peace might still be possible, but wars fueled by generational hatred rarely end peacefully, especially in Skyrim. Ancient Nordic culture valued strength, conquest, and vengeance deeply. Songs and legends celebrated victorious warriors. Defeating enemies became central to Nordic identity itself, and the Snow Elves became the enemy around which much of early Nordic civilization formed. The tragedy of the Falmer was no longer simply a war for territory. It became a cultural extinction, one civilization replacing another, one people slowly disappearing from the surface of the world. And eventually, the surviving Snow Elves faced an impossible choice: remain above ground and die, or descend beneath Skyrim itself into the endless underground cities of the Dwemer. A decision that would ultimately destroy them forever. Chapter 4. The Return of Ysgramor. The sea crossing from Atmora to Skyrim was brutal, even for hardened warriors. The Sea of Ghosts earned its name honestly. Massive freezing storms swept across the northern waters without warning. Ice formed across ship decks during the night. Entire crews disappeared beneath dark waves without leaving a trace behind. And somewhere within those freezing storms, Ysgramor returned to Skyrim. Nordic legends transformed this journey into something almost sacred. The Return, a moment when mankind reclaimed the North through blood and vengeance. The 500 companions became legendary across Nordic culture. Ancient songs describe them as fearless warriors chosen by destiny itself. Giant men clad in fur and iron crossing into Skyrim to avenge Sarthal and carve a future for mankind. But beneath the mythology surrounding them, the reality was likely horrifying, because the Return of Ysgramor was not simply a rescue mission. It was a conquest. The early wars between the Nords and Snow Elves were fought across some of the harshest environments in Tamriel. Frozen mountain passes, blizzard-covered valleys, dense pine forests, ancient ruins hidden beneath snow. The battles themselves must have been brutal beyond imagination. Steel against magic, axes against bows, torchlight flickering through snowstorms, while armies clashed beneath the northern lights. And slowly, the Snow Elves began losing everything. Nordic expansion spread aggressively throughout Skyrim during the centuries following Sarthal's destruction. Human settlements multiplied rapidly. Fortresses rose across valleys and coastlines once controlled by the Falmer. Entire Snow Elf cities disappeared. Some were destroyed, others abandoned. Many likely vanished beneath ice and time itself. And as the war continued, the surviving Snow Elves became increasingly desperate, because they were no longer fighting to preserve power. They were fighting simply to survive at all. The genocide of the Snow Elves remains one of the darkest chapters in Elder Scrolls history. Modern Nords often remember Ysgramor as a hero, a founder, a conqueror who secured Skyrim for mankind. But from another perspective, the Return of Ysgramor represents the destruction of an entire civilization, an entire people erased from the surface world. And perhaps the most tragic part of all is that history eventually forgot what the Snow Elves once were. Most people in Skyrim no longer think of the Falmer as descendants of a lost civilization. They think of them as monsters, blind creatures beneath the earth, savages lurking in ruins, predators hiding in darkness. Very few remember that the Falmer once ruled Skyrim beneath the open sky, that they once built temples, worshipped the sun, created art and architecture, loved families, dreamed about the future. History transformed them into beasts long before their bodies ever changed underground. And eventually, the surviving Snow Elves reached the edge of extinction itself. With Nordic armies dominating Skyrim above ground, only one hope remained: the Dwemer. Chapter 5. The Dwemer offer refuge. By the time the surviving Snow Elves turned toward the Dwemer, their civilization was already collapsing. The great temples of the Falmer had fallen silent. Ancient cities stood abandoned beneath snow and ice. Entire bloodlines vanished during the wars with the Nords, and those who remained alive wandered through a Skyrim that no longer belonged to them. The world above ground had become hostile. Every mountain pass carried danger. Every ruined settlement reminded them of what had been lost. The surviving Snow Elves were exhausted, starving, and hunted. And somewhere beneath the mountains of Skyrim, another civilization watched everything unfold from the darkness below. The Dwemer, the Deep Elves. Even among the many strange races of Tamriel, the Dwemer were deeply unusual. Unlike the spiritual Snow Elves, the Dwemer placed little faith in gods or divine powers. They were builders, engineers, philosophers, and scholars obsessed with knowledge and control over the physical world. While the Falmer worshipped Auri-El beneath open skies, the Dwemer vanished underground into enormous mechanical cities hidden beneath the earth. And those underground kingdoms were unlike anything else in Tamriel. Massive bronze towers rose within cavern systems, stretching for miles beneath Skyrim. Steam-powered machines echoed through ancient halls. Giant pipes carried boiling water through metallic chambers, lit by strange glowing lights. The Dwemer did not simply live underground. They transformed the underground itself into an empire. Cities like Blackreach became vast hidden worlds beneath the mountains. Underground rivers flowed beside enormous mechanical structures. Entire civilizations thrived beneath the feet of those living on the surface above. To the desperate remnants of the Snow Elves, the Dwemer must have seemed almost godlike, safe, powerful, untouched by the wars consuming Skyrim. And according to surviving accounts, the Dwemer offered refuge. At first, it may have appeared like salvation. The surviving Snow Elves descended into the underground cities, seeking protection from Nordic extermination. They abandoned the surface world entirely and placed their future in Dwemer hands. But the Dwemer demanded something in return. The Snow Elves were forced to consume toxic fungi cultivated deep beneath the earth. Over time, the effects became catastrophic. Blindness spread through the surviving Falmer. At first slowly, then completely. Generation after generation lost the ability to see. And eventually, something even worse began happening. Their minds changed. The exact details surrounding the Dwemer betrayal remain unclear even in modern Elder Scrolls lore. Some scholars believe the toxic fungi were intentionally designed to enslave the Snow Elves. Others argue the Dwemer viewed the Falmer merely as another experiment. But regardless of intention, the outcome was devastating. The Snow Elves became prisoners within the underground cities, blinded, dependent, broken. And over centuries, their original civilization slowly disappeared forever. The betrayal of the Dwemer feels uniquely horrifying because it was not immediate. The Snow Elves were not simply slaughtered, they were transformed. Their destruction happened gradually, across countless generations hidden beneath the earth. Children were born underground who never saw sunlight. Languages faded. Religious traditions disappeared. Ancient memories became fragmented stories passed through generations, increasingly disconnected from the world their ancestors once ruled. The elegant civilization described in ancient legends slowly dissolved into darkness, and the Dwemer remained above them, watching, using them, controlling them. The tragedy of the former is often compared to slavery or cultural annihilation within Elder Scrolls lore, but in many ways it became something even worse, because eventually the Falmer themselves may have forgotten who they once were. Imagine the psychological horror of such a transformation. An entire people losing not only their homeland, but their identity itself. No sky, no sunlight, no stars. Only endless tunnels beneath the earth. The descendants of the Snow Elves adapted to survive within those conditions. And survival changed them forever. Chapter 6. The Slow Transformation. The transformation of the Falmer did not happen in a single generation. It unfolded slowly, over centuries hidden beneath the mountains of Skyrim. At first, the surviving Snow Elves were likely still recognizable as the people they had once been. Blind, perhaps. Weakened. Dependent upon the Dwemer. But still Falmer. Still capable of remembering the surface world above them. Still able to recall sunlight reflecting across snow-covered mountains, or the sound of rivers flowing beneath open skies. But memory fades over time, especially when entire civilizations are trapped in darkness. The underground world beneath Skyrim is vast beyond comprehension. Even modern adventurers who explore Blackreach during the events of Skyrim encounter only fragments of what once existed there. Enormous caverns stretch endlessly through the earth. Ancient Dwemer machinery still groans somewhere within forgotten tunnels. Underground lakes reflect pale blue fungal light across ruined cities abandoned long ago. And within those depths, the descendants of the Snow Elves adapted to survive. Blindness became permanent. Without sunlight, their skin lost much of its original appearance. Their bodies changed after generations underground. Their eyes became pale and useless. Their hearing sharpened. Their movements grew fast and animalistic within the darkness surrounding them. Modern Falmer navigate caves almost like insects or bats. They hear movement through stone corridors, detect vibrations, strike suddenly from hidden tunnels before disappearing back into darkness. To travelers exploring Dwemer ruins, encounters with the Falmer feel almost supernatural. You rarely see them first. Instead, you hear them. Distant clicking noises. The scrape of crude weapons against stone. Soft movement echoing through tunnels beyond torchlight. And then, suddenly, they attack. But despite their horrifying appearance, evidence throughout Skyrim suggests the Falmer are far more intelligent than most people realize. This is important because many surface dwellers assume the Falmer became mindless beasts after generations underground. But that is not entirely true. The Falmer still build settlements. They create weapons and armor. They organize themselves socially. They domesticate creatures like the Chorus. They construct traps, guard territory, maintain primitive forms of ritual and hierarchy. Fragments of civilization still remain buried within them, which makes their tragedy even more painful. Because the Falmer were never completely erased. Part of the Snow Elves still survives within them, distorted perhaps, broken, but not entirely gone. And occasionally, Skyrim offers brief glimpses of what they once were. Ancient Falmer statues still stand within forgotten ruins. Snow Elf architecture survives within isolated regions untouched by time. The Forgotten Vale preserves sacred temples dedicated to Auri-El. And then there is Gelebor, a living Snow Elf who survived the fall of his civilization entirely. Through Gelebor, players finally learn the full truth behind the farmer's transformation during the Dawnguard storyline. Unlike the creatures roaming Dwemer ruins, Gelibor still resembles the ancient Snow Elves described in legends. He speaks calmly, remembers his people, protects ancient shrines devoted to Auri-El, and perhaps most tragically, he still hopes the farmer may one day recover. Not completely, not quickly, but slowly, because Gelibor notices signs of intelligence returning among them. Small changes, adaptations. The Falmer are evolving again, and that possibility raises terrifying questions about the future of Skyrim itself. Because if the Falmer continue changing, if they continue rebuilding, then one day, the descendants of the Snow Elves may emerge from beneath the earth once more, not as the graceful civilization they once were, but as something entirely new. Chapter 7. Blackreach, the Forgotten World. Among all the hidden places beneath Skyrim, none feel more unreal than Blackreach. Even by Elder Scrolls standards, Blackreach is astonishing. The first time most travelers descend into the cavern during Skyrim, the experience feels almost dreamlike. After hours wandering through narrow tunnels and ancient Dwemer ruins, the underground suddenly opens into something enormous. A world beneath the world. Massive glowing fungi illuminate the darkness with pale blue light. Underground rivers stretch across cavern floors, larger than entire cities. Dwemer towers rise silently beside ruined roads, an ancient machinery abandoned thousands of years ago. And somewhere within that endless underground landscape, the Falmer still live. Blackreach is important not only because of its scale, but because it reveals how completely the Falmer civilization became intertwined with the underground world surrounding them. This is no longer simply a prison. It became their entire reality. Entire generations were born beneath those glowing caverns without ever seeing the surface world above. To them, Blackreach is normal. The surface is myth. Imagine what that psychological transformation must have looked like across centuries. The Snow Elves once worshipped sunlight. Now their descendants fear it. The Falmer evolved within darkness so completely that bright light itself became painful to them. Their hearing sharpened because sight disappeared. Their bodies adapted because survival demanded it, and Blackreach shaped every part of that transformation. The environment itself feels alive. Strange fungi pulse softly in the darkness. Chorus nests spread through tunnels, like living infestations. Steam rises from ancient Dwemer pipes, still functioning after thousands of years. Water drips endlessly through cavern ceilings high above. There is beauty within Blackreach, but it is a cold beauty, an alien beauty. The kind that reminds you you were never meant to live there. And perhaps the most haunting part of Blackreach is its silence. Not true silence, but distant silence. The feeling that something enormous exists somewhere beyond the darkness, just outside the edge of torchlight. The Falmer move through Blackreach constantly, watching, listening, hunting, to surface dwellers. They appear monstrous, but from another perspective, Blackreach belongs to them now. The Falmer know every tunnel, every hidden passage, every ruined Dwemer structure. The underground became their kingdom after the surface world was taken from them. And over time, the Falmer transformed the ruins left behind by the Dwemer into something new. Primitive camps appeared beside ancient machinery. Bone totems rose within ruined halls. Chorus pens spread through abandoned chambers. The descendants of the Snow Elves slowly reclaimed the underground world built by those who betrayed them. In a strange way, the Falmer survived where the Dwemer did not. The The Dwemer vanished completely during the mysterious disappearance that erased their civilization from Tamriel. But the Falmer remained. Broken, perhaps. Twisted, but alive. And deep within Blackreach, the final remnants of two lost civilizations still linger together in darkness. Chapter 8. The Falmer and the Chorus. Deep beneath Skyrim, the Falmer were not alone. Over centuries hidden underground, another creature became central to their survival. The Chorus. To most adventurers exploring Dwemer ruins, Chorus are horrifying creatures. Massive insect-like predators covered in hardened shells. Their movements are fast and unnatural. Their attacks are violent. Poison drips from their mandibles, and their screeches echo through underground tunnels like something pulled from a nightmare. But to the Falmer, the Chorus became far more than beasts. They became companions, tools, livestock, weapons. Entire Falmer settlements appear built around them. Chorus nests spread throughout caves and ruins beneath Skyrim. Eggs are harvested. Flesh is consumed. Their chitin is used for armor and weapons. In many ways, the Falmer adapted to underground life by building their civilization around these creatures entirely. And this relationship reveals something important about how deeply the Falmer changed beneath the earth. The Snow Elves once lived among frozen forests and open skies. Their civilization valued beauty, light, and divine order. But underground survival demanded something else entirely. Pragmatism, brutality, adaptation. The Falmer learned to survive within darkness by embracing the creatures already living there. Over generations, the Chorus became almost sacred within Falmer society. Some scholars even believe certain Falmer rituals revolve around them. Their camps often contain strange organic structures built from chitin and bone. Their armor resembles insect shells. Their weapons appear crafted directly from underground creatures, rather than traditional metalworking. And perhaps most unsettling of all, Falmer and Chorus often defend one another instinctively. Adventurers entering Falmer territory are rarely attacked by one alone. The two species hunt together, fight together, live together. The underground transformed both into parts of the same ecosystem. And because of this, exploring Falmer territory feels deeply alien compared to the surface world of Skyrim. The air becomes damp and heavy. Organic nests spread across ancient stone. Chittering noises echo endlessly through darkness. The Falmer adapted so completely to underground life that they no longer resemble surface civilizations at all. They became something uniquely tied to the deep places beneath Tamriel. Something born from survival within endless darkness. And yet, even surrounded by insect nests and crude tribal camps, fragments of their old intelligence still remain. Falmer ambushes are often highly coordinated. Their traps are sophisticated. Their settlements show signs of hierarchy and planning, which makes their condition feel even sadder somehow. Because beneath the monstrous exterior, traces of the Snow Elves still linger, buried beneath centuries of suffering and adaptation. Chapter 9. The Religion of the Snow Elves. Before the fall of their civilization, faith shaped nearly every aspect of Snow Elf culture. The ancient Falmer were deeply spiritual people, and above all else, they worshipped Auri-El, the elven aspect of Akatosh, god of time, eternity, divine order. To the Snow Elves, Auri-El represented purity and transcendence. Their temples reflected this devotion, unlike the heavy stone tombs later built by the Nords. Snow Elf architecture emphasized openness and light. Towers stretch toward the heavens, sacred shrines aligned with sunlight and celestial movement. Their cities almost seem designed to honor the sky itself. This is one reason the tragedy of the Falmer feels so devastating, because the descendants of a people who once worshipped sunlight became creatures trapped forever beneath the earth. The symbolism is impossible to ignore. The Snow Elves lost not only their homeland, but the very thing their religion centered around: light itself. During the Dawnguard storyline in Skyrim, players encounter surviving shrines devoted to Auri-El, hidden within the Forgotten Vale. Even after thousands of years, the sacred pathways and temples remain standing beneath snow-covered cliffs and frozen waterfalls. And there, guarding those ancient shrines, stands Gelebor, one of the final living Snow Elves. Through Gelebor, we learn that many Snow Elves remained devoted to Auri-El, even as their civilization collapsed around them. Some retreated into isolated sanctuaries, rather than descending underground with the Dwemer. Others fought to preserve fragments of their culture for as long as possible. But time eventually destroyed nearly everything they built. Their temples became ruined. Their people disappeared. Their language faded from the surface world. And perhaps most tragically, the modern Falmer no longer appear connected to Auri-El at all. Whatever religion survives among them today has become fragmented and primitive. Some Falmer camps contain crude totems and ritualistic structures, suggesting forms of tribal worship still exist. But if the descendants of the Snow Elves remember Auri-El anymore, they likely remember him only as a distant echo buried within generations of darkness. Imagine the sadness of that transformation. The people who once worshipped the sun eventually forgetting what sunlight even looked like. Their gods became memories. Their memories became myths. And eventually, even the myths disappeared into darkness beneath Skyrim. Chapter 10. The Falmer of Modern Skyrim. To most people living in Skyrim during the Fourth Era, the Falmer are creatures of fear and rumour. Travellers speak of pale figures moving through abandoned ruins. Miners vanish near cave systems beneath the mountains. Entire expeditions disappear exploring ancient Dwemer cities. And deep below the surface, the Falmer continues spreading through forgotten tunnels beneath Skyrim. Most surface dwellers know almost nothing about them. Many assume they are simple monsters, animals, savage creatures barely capable of thought. But the reality is far more disturbing, because the Falmer are intelligent enough to organize. And throughout Skyrim, evidence suggests they may be growing stronger. Their settlements appear increasingly complex. Their attacks are more coordinated. Some ruins contain evidence that the Falmer actively raid the surface for supplies, weapons, and captives. They understand territory, strategy, warfare. In many ways, the Falmer of modern Skyrim resembles a civilization slowly rebuilding itself beneath the earth. Not the elegant civilization of the ancient Snow Elves. Something harsher, more brutal, more adapted to darkness, but still a civilization nonetheless. This possibility terrifies many scholars within Tamriel, because Skyrim's underground is enormous, far larger than most surface dwellers realize. Ancient Dwemer tunnels connect enormous portions of the province beneath the mountains. Blackreach alone spans incredible distances beneath Skyrim. And if the Falmer continues evolving, they already possess a hidden kingdom beneath the feet of mankind. Entire armies could potentially move underground unnoticed. Entire settlements could exist in caverns no surface dweller has ever seen. The Falmer are no longer remnants hiding from extinction. They survived, adapted, endured, And now, they may be changing again. This possibility becomes especially unsettling when considering Gelibor's observations during Dawnguard. He specifically notes signs of growing intelligence among modern Falmer. Their behavior is changing, evolving, which raises a terrifying possibility. What if the Falmer are only at the beginning of their recovery? What happens if future generations become even smarter, more organized, more capable of rebuilding society beneath Skyrim? The descendants of the Snow Elves may never return to what they once were, but they may become something entirely new. And somewhere beneath the frozen mountains of Skyrim, that future may already be beginning. Chapter 11. The Psychology of the Falmer. More than almost any other race in the Elder Scrolls, the Falmer embody generational trauma. Their entire existence became shaped by loss. The loss of their homeland, their civilization, their religion, their identity, their freedom, and eventually, even their physical form. Most tragedies in Tamriel occur across years or decades, but the suffering of the Falmer unfolded across centuries. Entire generations were born into darkness without understanding what had been taken from them. Children grew old underground, having never once seen the sky. The original Snow Elves likely remembered sunlight, mountains, forests, frozen rivers beneath open skies. But their descendants inherited only fragments of those memories. Stories became legends. Legends became instinct, and instinct slowly replaced culture itself. This is part of what makes the Falmer so unsettling psychologically. They often behave like predators, but traces of something older still remain beneath the surface. Their settlements show organization. Their ambushes demonstrate planning and coordination. They create tools, maintain territory, raise young, protect resources. In other words, despite everything that happened to them, part of their civilization survived. Distorted, perhaps. Primitive, violent, but alive. Imagine existing within endless darkness for generations. No sunrise, no seasons, no stars. Only underground rivers, glowing fungi, damp stone, and the constant fear of survival. Over time, such an existence would fundamentally alter how a species thinks. The Falmer adapted psychologically to an environment where hesitation meant death. Their hearing sharpened because sight disappeared. Their aggression intensified because underground resources remained limited. Their distrust of outsiders became absolute because every encounter with surface dwellers historically brought suffering, and perhaps most tragically, the Falmer likely inherited fear itself through generations. Fear of light, fear of strangers, fear of extinction returning once again. Some scholars within Tamriel argue that modern Falmer aggression is not simple savagery at all. It may be the result of centuries spent surviving inside an unforgiving environment beneath the earth. An environment where violence became necessary, where weakness disappeared quickly, where survival itself demanded brutality. And yet, despite everything, there are still moments within Skyrim where glimpses of their buried identity emerge. Falmer architecture occasionally mimics older elven designs. Certain camps contain ritualistic layouts, suggesting preserved cultural memory. Some Falmer demonstrate curiosity rather than immediate hostility. Small fragments, tiny remnants, but enough to suggest the Snow Elves were never entirely erased, which creates one of the saddest questions in Elder Scrolls lore. Deep within whatever remains of their minds, do the Falmer remember what they once were? Somewhere within their instincts, buried beneath centuries of darkness, do they still dream about sunlight? Chapter 12. The Forgotten Veil. Hidden far beyond the mountains of Skyrim, isolated from much of the world for thousands of years, lies one of the last untouched remnants of Snow Elf civilization, the Forgotten Vale. Even its name feels mournful somehow, like a place abandoned by history itself. During the events of Skyrim's Dawnguard expansion, players discover the Forgotten Vale while searching for Auri-El's bow. And unlike the ruined Dwemer tunnels filled with Falmer camps and underground darkness, the Forgotten Vale feels almost sacred. Massive, frozen waterfalls cascade between cliffs covered in snow. Ancient bridges stretch across icy ravines. Quiet shrines dedicated to Auri-El still stand beneath the pale northern sky. The atmosphere there feels different from the rest of Skyrim. Still, peaceful, almost untouched by time. It is one of the few surviving glimpses of what Snow Elf civilization may once have looked like before its destruction. And within the Forgotten Vale, players encounter something once believed impossible: living Snow Elves, specifically Knight Paladin Gelebor, one of the last known surviving members of the original Falmer race. Meeting Gelebor changes the entire emotional weight of the Falmer storyline, because suddenly, the tragedy is no longer abstract history, it becomes personal. Gelebor speaks calmly and intelligently. He remembers the fall of his people. He remembers their faith, their culture, their destruction. And unlike the twisted Falmer beneath Skyrim, Gelebor still physically resembles the graceful Snow Elves described in ancient legends. Through him, the player finally understands what was truly lost. The Snow Elves were not monsters. They were a civilization, a people with history, beliefs, architecture, and identity. And perhaps the saddest part of Gelebor's story is his loneliness. Imagine surviving for thousands of years while watching your entire race disappear. Watching your people transformed into creatures they themselves would no longer recognize. Remaining alone inside frozen ruins while the world above changes generation after generation. Gelebor became something like a living ghost, a final witness to a civilization erased from history. Yet despite everything, he still refuses to hate the Falmer completely. This is important, because Gelebor understands something most people in Skyrim do not. The Falmer are victims, horrifying perhaps, dangerous certainly, but ultimately, victims of unimaginable suffering. Gelebor even expresses cautious hope that the Falmer may someday regain parts of their lost intelligence over time. Not quickly, not completely, but gradually. Evolution moving in reverse. Recovery emerging from centuries of darkness. And this possibility changes how we view the Falmer entirely, because perhaps their story is not finished yet. Chapter 13. The Dwemer Disappearance. One of the strangest parts of the Falmer tragedy is that the civilization responsible for their destruction vanished completely. The Dwemer, the Deep Elves, masters of engineering and underground civilization. The same people who blinded and enslaved the Snow Elves beneath Skyrim eventually disappeared from Tamriel entirely. Their cities remained, their machines endured. But the Dwemer themselves vanished during the Battle of Red Mountain in Morrowind thousands of years ago. No one truly knows exactly what happened. Some theories suggest they attempted to achieve godhood. Others believe they accidentally destroyed themselves while manipulating the heart of Lorkhan. Whatever the truth may be, the result was absolute. One moment the Dwemer existed across Tamriel. The next, they were gone. And deep beneath Skyrim, the Falmer remained trapped inside the ruins left behind. There is something deeply poetic about this outcome. The Snow Elves lost everything to the Dwemer: their sight, their freedom, their civilization. Yet in the end, the Dwemer vanished while the Falmer survived. Broken, perhaps. Twisted beyond recognition, but alive. Over time. The Falmer slowly reclaimed portions of the underground cities once ruled by their former masters. Dwemer halls became hunting grounds, ancient chambers transformed into tribal camps. Shorus nests spread through once pristine mechanical corridors. In a strange and tragic way, the Falmer inherited the underground empire of the Dwemer. But inheritance is not the same as restoration. The Falmer never rebuilt the grand civilization they once possessed. Blackreach remains beautiful, but haunted. Dwemer ruins still dominate the underground landscape, like the skeleton of a dead world. Steam pipes groan endlessly through abandoned halls. Ancient automatons continue wandering through corridors long after their creators disappeared. Exploring these ruins in Skyrim feels less like entering a city, and more like walking through the corpse of history itself. And somewhere within those ruins, the Falmer continue surviving among the remnants of civilizations that destroyed one another long ago. The underground became a graveyard of lost empires, Snow Elves, Dwemer, forgotten kingdoms buried beneath stone and darkness. And the Falmer became the final living reminder of both. Chapter 14, The Former Hunters of the Deep. For most people living on the surface of Skyrim, caves are temporary places. Dangerous, perhaps. Uncomfortable, certainly, but still temporary. Travelers enter them briefly before returning once more beneath the open sky. The Falmer never return to the sky. The underground is their entire world. And because of this, they became masters of it in ways surface dwellers can barely comprehend. Modern Falmer hunt through darkness with terrifying efficiency. Their hearing is so refined that even small movements can alert them across long distances within enclosed tunnels. The sound of boots scraping stone, armor shifting, water dripping from clothing. All of it echoes through underground chambers like signals. Adventurers exploring Falmer territory often describe the same terrifying experience. At first, nothing, only silence. Then slowly, the realization that something is following them, not charging, not attacking immediately, listening, tracking, waiting. The Falmer understand the underground far better than outsiders ever could. They know every hidden passage, every tunnel bend, every collapsed corridor and underground stream. To them, darkness is not an obstacle. It is protection. And this makes encounters with the Falmer feel fundamentally different from battles against bandits or wild animals on the surface. Fighting the Falmer often feels like being hunted. Torches illuminate only small sections of surrounding tunnels, while movement echoes somewhere beyond visibility. Arrows emerge suddenly from darkness. Chorus screeches bounce through caverns from impossible directions. Pale figures move quickly across ruined bridges before disappearing again into shadow. The underground belongs to them. And perhaps most disturbing of all, the Falmer appear patient. They do not always rush into combat immediately. Some groups seem willing to observe intruders for extended periods before striking, coordinating ambushes, testing weaknesses, waiting for opportunities. This patience suggests intelligence far beyond simple animal instinct. The Falmer are predators shaped by generations of underground survival. And survival beneath Skyrim demanded adaptation, unlike anything experienced by surface civilizations. Imagine growing up within a world where light itself is dangerous, where hearing replaces sight, where every sound carries through stone corridors for miles, where entire communities depend upon coordinated hunting and defense within total darkness. The Falmer became products of that environment completely. Their brutality was shaped by necessity. Their aggression was reinforced through generations of hardship. Their fear of outsiders inherited through centuries of suffering. And yet, despite their terrifying reputation, the Falmer are still survivors before anything else. Their civilization should have vanished long ago. Instead, they endured, adapted, evolved, even beneath unimaginable conditions. There is something strangely tragic about that resilience, because every Falmer attack, every underground ambush, every pale figure glimpsed beyond torchlight, ultimately traces back to the destruction of the Snow Elves thousands of years earlier. The horrors beneath Skyrim did not appear naturally. They were created. Chapter 15. The Ruins Beneath Skyrim. One of the reasons the Falmer feel so haunting within Skyrim is because they are inseparable from the ruins surrounding them. Nearly every major Falmer encounter occurs within places already filled with ancient history. Dwemer cities, forgotten tunnels, buried temples, collapsed underground roads. Exploring these locations creates a constant feeling that the player is walking through layers of lost civilizations stacked upon one another beneath the earth. A ruined Nordic tomb might lead into ancient Dwemer machinery. Beneath the Dwemer ruins, Falmer camps spread through darkness, and somewhere deeper still, forgotten caverns continue beyond the reach of both history and light. Skyrim's underground feels endless, precisely because it contains the remnants of so many fallen worlds. The Falmer became part of that atmosphere completely. Their presence transforms ruins into living ecosystems, rather than abandoned structures. Chorus nests fill collapsed hallways. Primitive tents appear beside broken Dwemer mechanisms. Bone decorations hang from ancient stone archways. It feels as though the Falmer reclaimed these places slowly, over generations after the disappearance of the Dwemer. Not restoring them, consuming them. Dwemer ruins themselves are already deeply unsettling environments. Massive bronze machinery still functions after thousands of years without explanation. Steam hisses endlessly through pipes hidden inside walls. Mechanical automatons patrol silent corridors beneath the earth, long after their creators vanished. And then the Falmer appear within those ruins like living ghosts, haunting the remains of another civilization's corpse. It creates one of Skyrim's strongest atmospheres. Ancient history, buried beneath layers of silence and darkness. Sometimes, the ruins themselves almost feel more important than the combat happening inside them. Vast underground chambers stretch into darkness beyond visibility. Bridges hang above glowing caverns illuminated by blue fungi. Giant gears continue turning somewhere within the walls. Water drips endlessly from unseen ceilings high above. There is beauty there, but it is the beauty of abandonment, the beauty of civilizations that collapsed long ago, while their remains slowly decayed beneath the earth. And among all those ruins, the Falmer continue surviving quietly, beneath the feet of the surface world. Entire underground societies, hidden from most of Tamriel. Entirely. It raises unsettling questions about how much of Skyrim remains unknown, even during the events of the games themselves. If Blackreach alone is so enormous, how many deeper caverns still exist? How many hidden Falmer settlements remain undiscovered beneath the mountains? How much of the underground belongs to them already? Skyrim's surface often feels harsh and dangerous, but beneath that frozen landscape exists another world entirely. Older, stranger, and filled with the remnants of civilizations history nearly forgot. Chapter 16. The Last Memories of the Snow Elves. Somewhere within the Falmer, fragments of the Snow Elves may still survive. Not physically, perhaps, but psychologically, culturally, instinctively. This possibility lingers throughout nearly every Falmer encounter in Skyrim, because despite how horrifying they became, there are moments where traces of intelligence and memory seem impossible to ignore. Falmer camps often contain primitive forms of structure and organization. Certain ruins reveal ritualistic layouts. Some Falmer appear to preserve objects or spaces in ways suggesting cultural meaning rather than simple utility. These details matter because they imply the descendants of the Snow Elves were never reduced entirely to mindless creatures. Something survived the transformation. Even after blindness, even after generations underground, even after centuries of suffering. And perhaps the most haunting question of all is whether the Falmer themselves understand what was lost. Imagine inheriting fragments of a civilization you can no longer fully comprehend. Strange instinct pulling toward forgotten architecture. Rituals repeated without understanding their original meaning. Fear of sunlight, despite never seeing the sun yourself. It is possible the modern Falmer exists surrounded constantly by echoes of a past they no longer remember consciously. Ancient Snow Elf ruins still stand throughout Skyrim. Sacred shrines dedicated to Auri-El survive within isolated valleys. Falmer architecture, from before the Fall, still reflects elegance and beauty, completely absent from their modern underground settlements. And somewhere deep within the minds of their descendants, traces of those forgotten worlds may still linger. The tragedy becomes even heavier when viewed through this perspective. The Falmer are not simply monsters created through physical mutation. They are descendants of a civilization trapped within the ruins of its own forgotten identity. Their aggression may partly emerge from confusion and inherited trauma, as much as survival instinct. Entire generations living surrounded by fragments of a history they can never fully recover. Even Gelibor seems to recognize this. He never speaks about the Falmer with simple hatred. Sadness, perhaps. Grief, certainly. But not hatred, because Gelibor understands the Falmer are still his people. Twisted beyond recognition, but still connected to the Snow Elves who once ruled Skyrim beneath the open sky. And perhaps somewhere within the darkness beneath Blackreach, some tiny fragment of the old Falmer civilization still survives. A fading memory buried beneath generations of suffering, waiting quietly in the dark. Chapter 17. Gelibor and the Weight of Memory. Among all the tragic figures in the Elder Scrolls, few feel as lonely as Knight Paladin Gelibor. Hidden within the Forgotten Vale for thousands of years, Gelibor exists almost outside of time itself. Entire empires rose and collapsed while he remained guarding the shrines of Auri-El. Dynasties vanished. Wars consumed Tamriel. The world changed endlessly above him. And still, Gelibor remained alone among the frozen ruins of his people. Imagine carrying memories no one else alive can truly understand. Gelibor remembers the Snow Elves before the Fall. He remembers their civilization while it still lived beneath open skies. He remembers the temples, the rituals, the sunlight reflecting across white stone cities hidden among Skyrim's mountains. And he remembers watching all of it disappear. The emotional weight of Gelibor's existence is almost unbearable when considered carefully. He's not simply the last surviving Snow Elf, physically untouched by the Falmer transformation. He is the final living witness to an erased civilization. Everything the Snow Elves once were survives almost entirely through him alone. their history, their faith, their culture, their voice. Without Gelebor, much of the truth surrounding the Falmer would remain buried forever beneath myth and fear. Most people in Skyrim see only monsters lurking underground. Gelebor sees the ghosts of his people, and perhaps that is why he speaks about the Falmer with such sadness rather than rage. Because unlike surface dwellers, he understands what they once were. There is a quiet exhaustion within Gelebor's dialogue throughout Dawnguard. Not hopelessness, exactly, but the weariness of someone who has endured grief for far too long. He speaks calmly about events that destroyed his civilization, because thousands of years have passed since those tragedies occurred. Time itself hollowed the pain into something quieter, colder, more permanent. Yet despite everything, Gelebor never fully abandons hope. This may be the most important part of his character. He notices changes among the Falmer, signs of adaptation, growing intelligence, subtle evolution occurring slowly across generations underground. Gelebor believes some form of recovery may still be possible, not a return to what the Snow Elves once were. That world is gone forever, but perhaps something new could emerge from the darkness eventually. This idea transforms the entire Falmer storyline, from pure tragedy into something more complicated. Because if the Falmer can evolve again, then their history is not finished. The descendants of the Snow Elves may still possess a future beneath Skyrim. And Gelebor, after carrying the memory of his people alone for thousands of years, continues waiting quietly to see what they might become. Chapter 18. The Silence of Blackreach. There is a particular kind of silence deep beneath Skyrim that feels different from silence on the surface. Surface silence is peaceful, forests after snowfall, quiet nights beside campfires, the distant sound of wind moving through pine trees beneath the moons. But the silence beneath Blackreach feels ancient, heavy, oppressive, as though the underground itself remembers everything that happened there. Exploring Blackreach for the first time often creates a strange emotional feeling difficult to describe. Awe, perhaps, but also unease. Because the cavern is beautiful in a way no place beneath the earth should be. Pale blue fungi glow softly across enormous underground lakes. Ancient Dwemer towers rise through darkness like forgotten monuments. Mist drifts above silent water, while distant machinery echoes endlessly through ruined halls. It feels less like a cave, and more like another world hidden beneath Skyrim entirely. And somewhere within that world, the Falmer continues surviving quietly among the ruins. There are moments in Blackreach where you can stop moving entirely and simply listen. Water dripping from unseen ceilings, steam hissing through ancient pipes, the faint screech of a chorus echoing somewhere in the distance, footsteps moving briefly across stone before disappearing again. It creates the constant sensation that something is alive within the darkness surrounding you, watching, waiting. Blackreach almost feels haunted by history itself. The remnants of two civilizations linger there, simultaneously. The Dwemer, who vanished mysteriously after building impossible underground kingdoms, and the Falmer, who survived the collapse of their own civilization, only to inherit the ruins left behind by their betrayers. Everything within Blackreach reflects decay mixed with survival. Ancient towers collapse slowly beside living Falmer camps. Broken Dwemer machines rust beside glowing fungal forests. Underground rivers continue flowing through cities abandoned thousands of years ago. Time feels strange there, as though the cavern exists outside the normal passage of history above the surface. And perhaps that is part of what makes the Falmer so compelling within Skyrim's atmosphere. They do not simply exist underground. They belong there now, completely. The surface world moved on without them. Empires rose. Dragons returned. Civil wars consumed Skyrim. But beneath all of it, the Falmer endured quietly, sitting within endless darkness. Their existence became tied to places most surface dwellers will never even see. Entire hidden ecosystems buried beneath mountains and ruins. The deeper you descend into Blackreach, the more distant the surface world begins to feel. Sunlight becomes memory. Snowstorms and forests seem unreal compared to glowing fungi and underground lakes stretching endlessly through darkness. And perhaps for the Falmer, that transformation happened generations ago. The surface became myth. The underground became reality. Their civilization adapted to silence, darkness, and survival, until eventually they became inseparable from the world beneath Skyrim itself. Chapter 19. The surface world above them. While the Falmer adapted to darkness beneath Skyrim, the surface world above them continued changing endlessly. Empires rose and collapsed. Nordic kingdoms fought civil wars. Dragons vanished from history and eventually returned. Entire generations lived and died without ever realizing what survived beneath their feet. There is something eerie about that contrast. On the surface, life in Skyrim feels loud and violent. War horns echo across valleys. Jarls argue for power. Armies march through snow-covered roads. Taverns glow warmly beside crowded city streets. But deep underground, the Falmer remain hidden within silence and darkness, almost completely removed from those conflicts. The people of Skyrim rarely think about what exists beneath them. Most travelers avoid Dwemer ruins entirely. Stories about Falmer attacks are treated like warnings told beside campfires, rather than signs of a much larger, hidden civilization underground. And because surface dwellers underestimate them, the Falmer remain mysterious, even during the events of Skyrim itself. Entire underground regions remain unexplored. Ancient tunnels likely stretch far beyond the areas players ever encounter. Blackreach alone suggests the underground world beneath Tamriel is vastly larger than most people imagine. It is possible entire Falmer settlements exist that no surface civilization has ever discovered. Entire hidden histories continuing quietly beneath the mountains. This separation between surface and underground creates a strange feeling throughout Skyrim's lore. Two worlds existing simultaneously without fully understanding one another. Above ground, mankind inherited Skyrim after the fall of the Snow Elves. But below ground, the descendants of the Falmer endured and adapted in darkness. Both civilizations continued evolving separately for thousands of years, and eventually, those hidden worlds began colliding again. Modern Skyrim sees increasing encounters with the Falmer. Adventurers explore deeper ruins. Mining operations uncover underground tunnels. Dwemer excavations disturb forgotten territories. Contact between surface and underground becomes more common constantly, which raises difficult questions about the future. Can the Falmer and surface civilizations ever coexist peacefully after everything that happened? Or is conflict inevitable? The descendants of the Snow Elves may never forgive what was done to them, and perhaps surface civilizations would never truly accept them regardless. Fear alone might make peace impossible, especially when most people still view the Falmer only as monsters beneath the earth. The tragedy becomes cyclical somehow. Violence created the Falmer originally, and future violence may continue shaping what they become next. Chapter 20. The deepest caverns of Skyrim. The Falmer encountered throughout Skyrim may represent only a small fraction of what truly exists beneath the province. This is one of the most unsettling possibilities hidden within Elder Scrolls lore, because Skyrim's underground is enormous beyond comprehension. Most travelers only experience fragments of it through caves, Dwemer ruins, and Blackreach itself. But ancient tunnels continue far deeper than the places most people ever see. Entire cavern systems remain completely unmapped. Underground rivers vanish into darkness, stretching for miles beneath the mountains. Forgotten ruins collapse into lower chambers untouched for thousands of years. And somewhere within those endless depths, the Falmer continue surviving. Imagine how many generations have lived and died underground without ever once seeing the surface world at all. Entire hidden tribes may exist far beyond the territories explored during Skyrim. Some groups could have evolved differently from others, depending upon the environment surrounding them. Certain caverns may contain underground ecosystems, completely isolated from the world above. Others may preserve strange fragments of Snow Elf culture, buried beneath centuries of adaptation and decay. The deeper one thinks about Skyrim's underground, the more alien it begins to feel. Surface civilizations believe they understand their world because they control the kingdoms above ground. But beneath all of that exists another realm entirely. Ancient, hidden, almost completely unknown, and the Falmer are among the few races fully adapted to surviving there. They move through darkness effortlessly, while surface dwellers stumble through caves carrying torches and fear. The underground belongs to them now. This possibility becomes especially disturbing when considering how ancient the Falmer truly are. Thousands of years underground allowed their civilization to spread far beyond isolated ruins. Entire hidden territories could already exist beneath Skyrim unnoticed by surface kingdoms entirely. And perhaps somewhere far below even Blackreach, there are Falmer settlements vastly older and stranger than anything encountered during Skyrim itself. Massive underground caverns illuminated by glowing fungal forests. Primitive kingdoms hidden beneath the roots of mountains. Ancient temples reclaimed by darkness and silence. Entire populations surviving quietly beneath the feet of the surface world above. The Elder Scrolls often hints that Tamriel is far larger and stranger than most people realize. Lost civilizations buried beneath history. Forgotten races surviving in hidden corners of the world. Ancient places untouched by modern kingdoms entirely. And the Falmer embody that mystery perfectly, because no one truly knows how deep their world beneath Skyrim actually goes. Somewhere below the ruins already explored, deeper darkness still waits. Chapter 21. The Falmer and Fear of the Unknown. Part of what makes the Falmer so effective within Skyrim's atmosphere is how little most people truly understand them. Fear thrives within uncertainty, and few creatures in the Elder Scrolls feel more uncertain than the Falmer. Travelers rarely see them clearly before attacks begin. Stories about them spread through rumor and fragmented accounts rather than direct understanding. Entire mining expeditions disappear beneath the mountains without explanation. Ancient ruins become associated with pale shapes, moving through darkness beyond torchlight. The Falmer exist within Skyrim, almost like folklore made real, campfire stories hidden beneath ancient history. And because surface civilizations know so little about them, imagination often makes them even more terrifying. What noises move through tunnels beneath abandoned Dwemer ruins during the night? How many Falmer are truly down there? How organized are they becoming? No one knows completely. Even scholars studying Dwemer ruins rarely survive long enough to uncover much truth. The underground itself protects the Falmer from understanding. Darkness hides them constantly, And perhaps this isolation shaped the Falmer psychologically as much as physical adaptation did. They learned to fear outsiders because outsiders historically brought destruction into their world. First, the Nords exterminated the Snow Elves above ground. Then the Dwemer enslaved them beneath the earth. Generations of suffering taught the Falmer that contact with other civilizations almost always led to pain. From their perspective, hiding within darkness became survival itself. And over centuries, that isolation transformed them into something surface civilizations could barely recognize anymore. There is tragedy hidden within that fear. The Falmer attack outsiders viciously, but perhaps they also fear outsiders just as deeply in return. The underground became their refuge after the collapse of everything else. Their world narrowed into tunnels, caverns, fungal forests, and silence. The surface became associated only with violence and extinction. And because of this, encounters between Falmer and surface dwellers almost always become hostile immediately. Neither side truly understands the other anymore. The descendants of the Snow Elves became myths to the people living above them. And the people above likely became myths to the Falmer in return. Two civilizations separated not only physically, but psychologically after thousands of years apart, which makes the Falmer feel less like invaders beneath Skyrim and more like the ghosts of a forgotten world buried alive beneath the earth. Chapter 22. Could the Falmer return? One of the most fascinating questions in Elder Scrolls lore is whether the Falmer could someday rebuild civilization beneath Skyrim. At first glance, the idea seems impossible. Modern Falmer appear savage and animalistic compared to the ancient Snow Elves. Their underground camps are primitive, their society brutal, their behavior often violent. But beneath that surface, evidence suggests something more complicated may already be happening. The Falmer are not stagnant, they are changing. This is important, because many fallen civilizations in Tamriel remain trapped permanently in the past. The Dwemer vanished, ancient Nordic kingdoms collapsed, entire cultures disappeared into history. But the Falmer survived, and survival allows evolution. Gelebor himself notices signs of increasing intelligence among modern Falmer populations. Their tactics continue improving. Their settlements show organization and adaptation. Some scholars even theorize the Falmer may eventually develop entirely new forms of culture, underground or separate from their Snow Elf origins. Imagine what such a civilization might look like centuries in the future. An underground empire shaped completely by darkness. Cities illuminated by glowing fungi instead of sunlight. Architecture built within caverns rather than mountainsides. A society adapted entirely around sound, vibration, and subterranean life. The descendants of the Snow Elves may never reclaim their former identity, but they may eventually become something equally advanced in entirely different ways. And this possibility becomes unsettling when considering the scale of Skyrim's underground. Blackreach alone is enormous, but Blackreach is likely only one fragment of a much larger subterranean world stretching beneath Tamriel. The Falmer may already control territories surface civilizations know nothing about. Entire hidden populations could exist beyond the ruins explored during Skyrim itself. If they continue evolving intellectually and socially, they could someday emerge as a major power once again. Not Snow Elves reborn, something entirely new. A civilization shaped by darkness instead of sunlight. Survival instead of beauty. Adaptation instead of tradition. And perhaps the cruelest irony of all is that the descendants of the people exterminated by mankind may someday inherit Skyrim from beneath the earth itself. Surface civilizations rise and fall constantly, Throughout Elder Scrolls history, empires collapse, wars devastate nations. But deep underground, the Falmer endure quietly, generation after generation, waiting in darkness while the world above changes endlessly. Their future remains uncertain, but one thing feels clear. The story of the Falmer is not over. Chapter 23. The Falmer in Elder Scrolls 6. Although very little is officially known about the Elder Scrolls 6, many fans believe the Falmer could play a much larger role in the future of the series. And honestly, it would make sense. Few races in Elder Scrolls lore still contain as much mystery and unresolved tragedy. Skyrim revealed fragments of their history. Dawnguard introduced Gelebor and the surviving Snow Elf temples. Blackreach showed the enormous scale of the underground world beneath Tamriel. But even after all of that, countless questions remain unanswered. How widespread are the Falmer truly? How much intelligence are they regaining? Do they still preserve fragments of ancient culture, unknown to the surface world? Could isolated groups of less corrupted Falmer still exist somewhere deeper underground? The Elder Scrolls has always loved civilizations hidden beneath history itself. Lost kingdoms, buried ruins, forgotten races surviving in darkness beyond the reach of modern empires. And the Falmer embody those themes perfectly. If future games explore deeper subterranean regions of Tamriel, the Falmer could become central to that atmosphere. Imagine descending into underground kingdoms far larger than Blackreach, ancient Snow Elf ruins untouched for thousands of years. Hidden Falmer societies evolved far beyond those encountered in Skyrim. Entire civilizations surviving beneath the surface world in silence and darkness. There is enormous storytelling potential there, especially because the Falmer are emotionally different from many enemies throughout Elder Scrolls lore. They are not evil in the same way Daedra or necromancers often appear evil. They are tragic, victims transformed into predators through generations of suffering and adaptation. Their existence constantly forces players to question the line between monster and victim, and Elder Scrolls storytelling is often strongest when morality becomes complicated rather than simple. Another possibility is that future games could explore divisions within Falmer society itself. If some groups are regaining intelligence faster than others, conflict may eventually emerge underground. Certain Falmer may attempt rebuilding organized civilization, while others remain violent and tribal. Some could even seek contact with the surface world eventually. The implications of that would be enormous. Imagine the people of Tamriel suddenly realizing the descendants of the Snow Elves never truly disappeared. That an entire civilization survived beneath their feet for thousands of years. Fear alone could ignite wars instantly, especially in Skyrim, where the memory of the Falmer remains tied so deeply to horror and violence. The future of the Falmer remains uncertain, but uncertainty is exactly what makes them so compelling. Their story still feels unfinished, buried beneath Skyrim's mountains, waiting quietly in darkness for whatever comes next. Chapter 24. The Possibility of Redemption. One of the quietest yet most powerful themes surrounding the Falmer is the idea of redemption. Not redemption in a heroic sense. The Falmer are not suddenly going to become peaceful sages living beside mankind in Skyrim's cities. Their suffering runs far too deep for something so simple. But there remains the possibility that they are not entirely lost either. Gelebor believes this. That matters, because Gelebor understands the Falmer better than anyone else still alive. He remembers what they once were, and despite witnessing their horrifying transformation firsthand, he still sees traces of hope within them. This hope is fragile, uncertain, but important, because without it, the Falmer became nothing more than a story about irreversible destruction. And Elder Scrolls lore rarely deals in absolutes. The world of Tamriel constantly changes. Races evolve, kingdoms collapse and rebuild, ancient enemies become allies, while civilizations believed extinct return unexpectedly. The Falmer may never recover their original civilization. The Snow Elves are gone forever. But perhaps their descendants can still become something more than mindless predators. Signs of intelligence already exist. Organization, strategy, communication, adaptation. These are not the behaviors of creatures entirely consumed by savagery. They are the behaviors of a people surviving under brutal conditions while slowly changing over generations. Redemption for the Falmer may not mean reclaiming the past. It may mean creating a future independent from the suffering that shaped them. A civilization no longer defined entirely by tragedy. And perhaps that possibility is why their story remains so emotionally powerful. Because beneath all the horror, there is still uncertainty. The Falmer exists suspended between extinction and rebirth, between monster and victim, between forgotten history and possible future. Their story has not reached its conclusion yet. Somewhere beneath Skyrim, new generations continue growing within darkness, and no one truly knows what those generations may eventually become. Chapter 25. What the Falmer represent. The Falmer are horrifying creatures within Skyrim. There is no denying that. Their appearance is disturbing. Their behavior is violent. Their underground settlements filled with bone, chitin, and darkness. But the reason the Falmer remains so memorable within Elder Scrolls lore goes far beyond horror alone. They represent something deeper. The Falmer embody what happens when history is forgotten. Their story is fundamentally about civilizations disappearing over time, about memory collapsing into myth, about victims eventually becoming viewed only as monsters, because the truth behind their suffering vanished generations earlier. Most people in Skyrim never question what the Falmer once were. They encounter blind creatures underground and assume they have always existed that way. Few stop to consider that these same beings once built temples, worshipped the sun, and ruled Skyrim itself beneath open skies. That loss of historical memory is central to the tragedy, because the Falmer did not simply lose their civilization physically, they lost their place within history itself. And this theme appears constantly throughout the Elder Scrolls. Entire races disappear, kingdoms collapse, ancient truths become distorted through myth and propaganda over centuries. The world of Tamriel is filled with forgotten histories buried beneath newer civilizations. The Falmer simply represent one of the most emotionally devastating examples. Their transformation also reflects the dangers of survival without identity. The Falmer survived extinction physically, but survival came at the cost of nearly everything they once were. Their culture faded, their religion disappeared, their connection to sunlight and the surface world collapsed entirely. They adapted so completely to underground life that eventually they became unrecognizable, even to themselves. And yet, fragments still remain. That is what makes their story so haunting. The Snow Elves were never fully erased. Small traces continue surviving within the Falmer, no matter how twisted their descendants became. The ruins of their civilization still stand. Their architecture remains beautiful. Gelebor still remembers them. And deep beneath Skyrim, echoes of their history continue moving through darkness. In many ways, the Falmer represent Elder Scrolls storytelling at its best. Complex, tragic, atmospheric, morally complicated. They are not villains in the traditional sense. They are survivors shaped by unimaginable suffering and adaptation. Monsters created through history rather than simple evil. And perhaps that is why their story lingers so strongly with players long after leaving Blackreach behind. Because beneath the horror, there is sadness. The sadness of realizing the creatures attacking from darkness were once something beautiful, something civilized, something lost. Chapter 26: The Tragedy of the Falmer. At its core, the story of the Falmer is not truly about monsters beneath the earth. It is about loss. The loss of identity, the loss of memory, the loss of an entire civilization slowly consumed by darkness and time. The Snow Elves once ruled Skyrim beneath open skies. They built temples dedicated to Auri-El. They created cities of white stone hidden among frozen mountains. They worshipped sunlight itself. And eventually, they became creatures that fear the light entirely. Few stories in fantasy feel as tragic as that transformation, because the Falmer were not destroyed instantly. Their suffering stretched across centuries. They watched their civilization collapse piece by piece. They fled underground, seeking survival, only to lose themselves completely over generations hidden beneath the earth. Even their enemies eventually forgot what they once were. Modern Nords speak of the Falmer as though they were always monsters. Ancient history became distorted until the Snow Elves themselves nearly vanished from memory entirely. And yet, fragments survived. Ruins buried beneath snow. Shrines hidden within the Forgotten Vale. Gelebor guarding the memory of his people alone through thousands of years of isolation. The Falmer storyline works so well because it constantly reminds players that civilizations are fragile. Even beautiful and advanced cultures can disappear beneath violence, fear, and time. Entire peoples can become myths. Myths can become monsters. And eventually, history itself forgets the truth, somewhere beneath. Skyrim, the descendants of the Snow Elves still move through darkness, blind, twisted, adapted to a world their ancestors were never meant to inhabit. But despite everything that happened to them, they survived. And perhaps that survival itself is the final tragedy, because the Falmer remain trapped forever between two identities, or no longer the Snow Elves they once were, but never entirely free from that lost past either. They are living ruins, a civilization still breathing long after its world ended. And deep beneath the frozen mountains of Skyrim, their story continues quietly, in darkness beneath the feet of the surface world above. So dim the lights once more, let the fire fade low beside you, and listen carefully to the silence beneath Skyrim, because somewhere far below the snow-covered mountains, beyond the ruins of forgotten kingdoms and the endless tunnels beneath Blackreach, the descendants of the Snow Elves are still waiting in darkness, still listening, still surviving, and perhaps still remembering.